Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and I am so grateful on this episode to be joined by a longtime friend of the show, Mr. Dan Rockwood.
Hey, everybody. It's been a long time since I've been back here. So I appreciate Josh asking me back for this episode in particular. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
And well, our guest for this episode is very special. If you guys are like Dan and I, you grew up on the School of Rock, you probably have no doubt who this our guest is for this episode. He is now a life coach and can't wait to jump into just talking about making this movie and the impact it's had on his career and also the mental health behind it as well. Mr. Brian-falduto. Did I say that right?
You got it. Yeah. Hello.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
So for those of you guys that may or may not know, you played Brian. Now, what was that? I'm sorry.
Billy.
I just watched Billy. I have it right here in my notes too. That's what I get for trying to go off cue. But yeah, so can you kind of talk about your experience with this movie and kind of the legacy it's had the last 20 years?
Yeah, almost 20. Don't age me yet. It's 19 this October and then 20 the following year, which should be fun. I think there's going to be like a reunion or something, but yeah, it's difficult to summarize, I suppose. But yeah, I was Billy in the film, better known as Fancy Pants, I suppose. And it was a good time. It was my first professional audition ever to be cast in School of Rock. And so I had a real misunderstanding of how the industry works. I was like, wow, this is easy. But yeah, and I had a great time. I'm still friends with a lot of the kids, and we talk often about how it was like this really cool experience to just basically be plucked out of the 4th or 5th grade and brought to Hollywood essentially, right? And like to be made to feel like a star every day, and to be on set in this environment, creating this film, which was very much about being yourself and sticking it to the man and recognizing how special you are and how your differences made you, unique and awesome and all these things that School of Rock sort of stands for. But then the flip side of that was we all then went back to our normal 4th and 5th grade lives, which was not as like nurturing and supportive as being on set in the movie. And so I think a lot of us experienced a really harsh shift, like having this wonderful accepting experience and then sort of being thrust back into 5th grade where, people aren't necessarily nice to each other in middle school and there's a lot of bullying going on and you're just sort of like back in with everybody. And I certainly dealt with a lot of that because, Billy was a seemingly queer character on screen, and this was back in 2003. So I suffered a lot of like homophobia and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, what was a special experience became a hard experience. But then it became special again later on in my life when I did finally come out of the closet, and now I get to do things like this where I talk about it, right? So it's all in all, like full circle. It's something I'm super grateful for, but there were definitely some hard years, and that's like the smallest summary I guess I can give.
I mean, the breakdown is, kids are mean. They can be mean. And especially to people who are different, especially back then. I like to think there's a bit more education now, a bit more acceptance, some areas more than others, as we have all seen. But it's I find it amazing. One, I think like the cultural impact of this movie and the way that it has really affected a lot of people over the years, and seeing that kind of representation back in 2003. I feel like it's impossible to predict when you're brought on board a project like this, but was there any inkling or any idea of the kind of like staying power that this movie would have? I mean, when you were on set, when you guys were filming, like, was there an awareness of just how good this was, or did it feel more like, this is a project, we're going to work hard, we're going to get it done and move on and do the next thing? And I guess what was some of the on the ground like feelings, as you were actually making this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all knew we were part of something special, but I don't think, no, I had no idea that 19 years later I would still be doing podcast interviews about it. Like, it's not it has had a really lasting impact, which again is fortunate, right? Because there's a ton of films that don't take off, right? And then there's also like the downside of it in that, it was a globally known film and I was in middle school. And so it was like it had good there were a lot of trade-offs in the fact that it was as big as it was. But yeah, I love seeing the impact it has to this day. And like now it became a Broadway musical and there's a Nickelodeon show and there's all these things. I'm really dreading the day they remake it, but I'm sure that will happen.
I find that you would be really impossible to remake this. Like, I feel like this film is like one of those like lightning in a bottle types of situations where like this to me, like even kind of, being over 30 now, like growing up on this movie, it feels really surreal to like even be on the same call as you right now. Just because like so many of your lines, like I can like quote as I'm watching this movie. This is one of those very rare movies that like, even as as an adult that like I still sing along to, I still quote, this is probably one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. And I remember a couple months ago, like watching this after having just a really bad day at work and just being like, man, like I need to podcast about this. And so when we started talking about doing back to school, this won our Twitter poll, and Kate from the Ignorance is Bliss podcast, shout out to her, connected us. And yeah, this movie is just, it just, I'm glad that it has the legacy that it does. Let me just say that.
No, me too. I'm a big fan of Sarah Silverman's podcast, and I listen to her talk about it occasionally. And she's always like, she loves that she got to be part of like something like this that has had such a lasting impact. And I feel similarly. It's cool. It's cool. It's like the amount of kids who like picked up instruments because of this film. That's like a cool feeling for sure.
That was something, I think some of the trivia that I was reading. So it looked like all of those kids had learned or were able to play those instruments. Is that correct? Do you remember, that process, that part of the movie?
Oh yeah, no, everyone was super talented. Yeah, I also had to play and sing to like audition for the film, but then my character ended up not. But like everyone who was cast was like had the ability to perform essentially. Yeah, and the instrumentalists, yeah, they all knew their instruments really well. I think the most interesting story that I can remember is that Rivka, who played Katie, the cello, it's a bass, had auditioned playing a different instrument, and then they were like, can you go learn the bass? And they came back and they were like, sure. And like basically like learned that for the film, if I'm remembering correctly, which is just like so impressive.
That's amazing. So the character going from a cello to a bass is very similar to what the actor had to go through.
Essentially, yeah. I know I had to learn the glockenspiel on set to play like for that like 20 seconds of a scene where I'm in the background like of a music theory class, like playing the glockenspiel. But I had like legit lessons for like 4 days on set to learn this, just to sit in the background and not actually be heard playing it. It's very interesting.
That's amazing. So it's really interesting because like some of the actors, you talked about this earlier, but some of the actors obviously like you guys transitioned back, and then of course Miranda Cosgrove got Drake and Josh, Carly, kind of had like her own music career and stuff like that. One of the things that I feel like is really interesting about your career is that this was kind of like it for you. Like your IMDb like said like reads School of Rock, and then there's a short in 2020. you got to talk about the mental health of being a child actor and kind of having that transition?
Yeah, totally. It wasn't it for me. It was it for me as far as like a feature film, but like I did a ton of performance in middle school. I filmed a commercial for Fruit by the Foot. I did like this pilot that never ended up going on NBC. I did a bunch of like regional theater credits back in the day, but then I did sort of elect in high school to not pursue it anymore. I wanted to just have like a normal 4 years of high school. And then I definitely experienced, there's like that quote, "You're only as great as your last movie," right, or whatever. So I think that I got like a warped I think I got a warped idea of a success at a young age, because this was my first professional audition ever, and it was so monstrous. So yeah, I did find myself like post college graduation stuff, like sort of subconsciously pursuing, you know, like the next big thing that would sort of like equate that, which like what is going to equate School of Rock, right? So it's like I did find myself sort of struggling with like just ideas of success and like what validation looks like in that lane. But I've also done a lot of work to sort of release myself from that. I went to college for a theater major, and then I pursued theater for a little bit, but then I actually ended up working in radio. And it was a country music radio station. And I fell in love with country music, and I'm a country music singer-songwriter. So I'm still doing the performance thing. It's just different. And it's nice. I have a lot more like autonomy over what I'm doing now, because like I'm not necessarily auditioning anymore, and I get to create my own stuff, which is cool. But yeah, I had to sort of navigate doing art because I love art, and not just doing art because like I want to be successful or some idea of success, like my art getting me there. And I had to just find a way to fall in love with the process regardless of the outcome. And that's sort of where I am as an artist these days, is like, it's hard not to create something and then want validation for it, of course, like you want people to like love your song, obviously, but I love the creating process enough that I'm happily still going, even if no one's listening, you know what I mean? And it's it's enjoyable for me, which is just a long way from where I used to be. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
I think I saw as the singing songwriting side of things, you had a new single drop fairly recently, didn't you?
Yeah, and it's kind of like doing its thing on TikTok, which is exciting. I feel like a old man trying to navigate TikTok, but I'm doing my best, and I've had two videos kind of take off, so we'll see. That's what I was doing this afternoon, I spend like one day a week trying to record all these TikToks, which it's so annoying, but I actually understand why people are on TikTok, because it really does connect you with people who want to find your stuff. And I suddenly have this whole new audience of people who really want to hear queer country music, and I'm really excited to be delivering that to them. So it's yeah, it has its pros and cons, just like everything.
I feel like country music can have so many more fans if it steps outside of the stereotype of like straight white male country singers who are going to sing about straight white male problems. And I like the concept of like a queer country song, like that's so cool, because we don't get much of that. There's a whole community that would probably be so into that type of music if there was just music that was written for them. So I think that's amazing that that you're kind of helping to spearhead that creative process, because it's something we definitely need more of.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like country music's all about storytelling, and there's a lot of like queer stories that need to be told. So it feels like it's such a natural segue. But yeah, there is a ton of resistance. Even today, I just posted a video replying to a comment of someone said that I'm ruining country because I'm like making gay music, and I was like, honestly, I love it. I have my first hater. It means I've made it. So, and it's not my first hater, because if we're recalling the IMDb. Is that it? IMDb. That's it, right? Yeah. IMDb
Yes,
message board days. This is something I grew up on. Like people were tearing me apart on those after the film. So like, if someone, it's kind of built a thicker skin. You know, nowadays I can release a queer country song and someone will say something and I'm like, I honestly don't care, which is nice.
Well, it's what a juxtaposition to like go from like 2003, kind of almost like pioneering something, because I feel like a character like Billy, you didn't really see a lot in those kind of like high but big budget, or at least like big studio budget films. Now it's kind of like an inclusion where it's kind of every day kind of thing. And it's nice to see how far we've come and how far we've grown. And the thing that I think is really cool about School of Rock is that like Billy as a character wasn't played for like a laugh, the way that it feels like a lot of other queer characters were around that time. Like it was like shameful to kind of go through, and like I know that like Dan and I like did research in for this episode, and we came across some interviews that you had done in the past talking about like the kind of the blowback, I guess, of School of Rock for your character in particular was dealing with homophobic or homophobia and stuff like that. How did that kind of like shape your journey to eventually coming out to be a queer man?
Yeah, it was hard. I think you make a great point. You know, I always joke that at the time it was like me, Ellen, and Will and Grace were like the queer representation on screen at the moment. And I was like 11, and I didn't even know what being gay was when the film came out. Like I was just being myself. I'm also I'm always very careful to not call Billy gay, because it's never really specified in the movie that he is. And that just goes over as a reflection of the times, right? That everyone
Sure.
called my character gay because it was just different than them. So they were like, that must be gay, right? But now we're living in a time where like, you know, men can be more feminine or expressive or eccentric, and it doesn't necessarily make them gay, right? That's at least what we're trying to gravitate towards culturally, I feel like. But that was like a little side tangent on the like whether or not Billy was gay. But either way, like yes, I was referred to as the gay kid from School of Rock for 19 years now. And yeah, it did have I didn't come out till senior year of college, because I was like so internally homophobic after that. Because if you think about it, I didn't know what being gay was, and everyone was like, you're gay, but they weren't saying it like, yay, you're gay. They were saying it negatively, like, don't be gay. And so I was just like, oh, okay, don't be gay. That was like the message I got before I even knew what it was. And so I just internalized that denial, like as if it wasn't even like an option for me. And then even in college, I went to this like really liberal school, a top theater program, and like everyone was like queer, like out or like whatever. And I was like, great for you, not going to be my situation. And so, yeah, it took a really long time I finally fell in love my senior year of college, and then we came out together. So that sort of ripped the Band-Aid off, but it was really hard. Yeah.
Well, now we live in a time where we're like, as we're doing this interview, I think we're like a week and a half away from Bros coming out, which is noted to be the first rom-com for the LGBT community. And Billy Eicher, I've fallen in love with over the last few years as a creator. So I'm excited for that one, but it just shows how far we've kind of progressed as a society.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's kind of crazy that it's the first queer film from like a major network, right? But absolutely, like wonderful progress. But yeah, there's always more to be had. I'm so excited to see it. I just watched his like on the street thing where he was promoting it, and I thought it was really funny.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, you seem like a very smart person. You're college educated. You're a life coach. So I want to ask, Jack Black's character Dewey in the movie, how much jail time do you think he ended up doing? Because not only does he steal someone's identity to impersonate them, but essentially infiltrates a school, literally kidnaps children at one point to bring them to the audition. Like, he breaks a lot of laws and it's just kind of breezed over. So I want to know what your thoughts are of just how much trouble did this guy get in, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess although in the film it's happy ever after, right? He ends up teaching class.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, he probably did a decent amount of jail time. Jack. Jack is every time I talk about Jack, I love to talk about just like how he really is genuinely like the most amazing person in the world. He's like everything that you see. He absolutely is. He's like this really joyous, infectious character of a person. And yeah, he's really great. He's been really supportive of all of us kids. We lost Kevin a couple of years ago, and Jack reached out to all of us to give his condolences. And Jack, he's been really supportive. He actually funded one of my music projects, which was like really sweet of him. Like he's like really, the move, he'll say himself, I think it was a special experience filming that movie, and we just created this like bond that I don't know, it's hard to describe, but all these years later, he's like happy to be in our lives. It's very sweet. I don't know.
That's incredible. And I feel like Jack Black now is known as, this comedic actor, and, his name and face is known nearly anywhere you go. But there's that passion for music that I feel like he's always had. And this movie was a really nice showcase of that, to the point where there are some moments it did not look like he was acting. It looked like he was just like jamming out and having a great time with you guys. So that was really cool to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were just like genuinely making us laugh, and like all those shots. It was great.
So I have to ask, while we're on the subject of music now, you guys both being musicians, and I don't know like what the level of like how often you guys talk, but is there possibly a Brian Jack crossover happening soon? Maybe Tenacious D?
I sent him my latest single. He was very sweet about it. But no, I don't know. We'll see. I know I think Kev played with Tenacious D once. Before he passed. So maybe it's on the table. We'll see. I don't know if Queer Country at a Tenacious D show, I don't know how well that would go over, but I'm down to try.
I think maybe better than you might expect. I mean, that the fandom, I think,
just a little bit
very welcoming of that. Well, I want to take a very short aside. Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Abby, who is a huge fan. When I told her that you can come on camera, here I'll give you the headphones. You can hear.
So awkward.
That's okay.
Hi.
It's so nice to meet you. I freaked out when he told me he was going to be interviewing you. School of Rock was like my comfort movie when I lived alone in college, and I put it on all the time, and I watched it over and over again, and your character was literally my favorite. So I was so excited. I quote, "I'll make up some samples" all the time. So anyway, thank you. I just was really excited.
No, thank you. That means so much. I appreciate it.
I can't wait to listen to this episode of the podcast. I'm so excited to hear everything you guys talked about, but thank you.
I'll try and make it good for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. She's very sweet.
Well, let's jump into your country career real quick and talk about kind of like what was it particularly? You talked earlier about like how you started like basically being like a DJ, I guess, is like a radio personality is like it's like the best terminology I could use. But like it kind of got into it. Like, what was it that kind of just was there any like artists in particular that kind of like really hooked you into the genre?
Yeah, I feel like a tinge of shame when I say it because I don't think it's the coolest route into country music. But when Carrie Underwood won American Idol, I was like such a big fan of the show at the time, and I thought she was really talented at singing. And so I started watching all the country music awards shows because she started performing on them. And then I was like, wow, I love Rascal Flatts, I love Shania Twain, I love Faith Hill. And then that was back in, when did she win Idol? I don't know, but like I was young enough that like country music's been like pretty prevalent in my life since at least the beginning of high school. But yeah, it's been like I went through, when I was working at the radio station, I went through this big breakup with that same guy I mentioned I came out with in college. And I was finding comfort in a lot of songs, but I was like, why are none of these songs about a guy? Like, where is the queer representation here in this genre? And there isn't any, which I was like, wow, that's, and it's funny because it has always felt like, we're trying to put queer representation into all these different genres and fields of entertainment. And I feel like country music, people just like gloss over as if it's like immune to like having that infiltration. And so like, it's fun to sort of experiment with being part of a few people who are doing their best to put that out there. And I love it. I love all types of music, but country music has a place in my heart. I like that there's a simple melody, there's simple instrumentation, there's a simple story. I grew up on like Michelle Branch. I don't all the EDM stuff nowadays. It's great, but it's not really my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you're like speaking like my kind of language when it comes to like. I'm not a country guy by any means. I listen to like brutal heavy metal and weird synth John Carpenter stuff. But like when I do listen to country, like you mentioned like Carrie Underwood, Rascal Flatts, like those are bands that like those are artists, and even like some Keith Urban too, that like Shania Twain, like I grew up on, like I can just like belt out, like it comes on the radio, boom, crank it and sing till your hearts gives sing until your lungs give out kind of music.
Yeah. And this EP is very much that style. It's very late 90s, early 2000s. Because even nowadays, there's like Lil Nas X, there's Brandy Carlisle. There are queer, like country adjacent artists, you know what I mean? But I was like, I want the sound I grew up on. I want that to be gayed up. You know what I mean? I want to be the gay male Shania is basically what I'm asking. And I won't rest until I am. No, just kidding.
I mean, I think you're well on your way. So, that's, you got definitely I feel like you've had a very, very good career so far. And there's so much more for you to go. So definitely you didn't peak with School of Rock and you didn't peak here on this podcast. There's, I think the best times for you are definitely ahead.
It will never be better than meeting Abby on this podcast.
Wow, she'll be so honored when she hears that. That's that's so cool. I mean, talk like representation, right? Like it's something that is so important. You have people from many different communities. Like anybody can be a fan of anything, right? So seeing yourself represented there is something that's important. And I think that's one of the things that School of Rock did really well is you had this diverse cast of children, different nationalities, different backgrounds, but it was never played really as a joke or even as something that was a big deal. There were struggles that were addressed, like when Jack Black talks with the singer, she doesn't want to go on because she thinks she's fat and she's self-conscious about that, and he has that really amazing moment with her where he hypes her up and tries to have her get her confidence in how amazing of a singer she is. So I love that that movie does well like in that way. It reminds me of around that same time, like Malcolm in the Middle was being filmed, and I said that show was really progressive because Malcolm's best friend was a black kid in a wheelchair, and neither of those things are ever mentioned or talked about in the show. It's just a fact, and he's never like really bullied for being in a wheelchair. There's no there's no issue there. It's just, oh, this is his best friend. And I always thought that was a really like cool way to kind of approach that relationship between those two. And so, I guess, long story long, bringing it back to, the kind of country music you want to do, the kind of music that you want to put out there. It's I think that you're going to find that there's definitely, a really cool community of people who are looking for that kind of thing. And I know, like you've mentioned, you've already had some haters. Honestly, the more you get, I think that just means you're doing the right thing and you're going in the right direction. I view it as, if I write something or say something online and someone gets super mad about it for the reasons that I'm arguing against, then it's like, okay, if I made you mad, then I know I'm on to something good here, because that is you're not the kind of person that I'm trying to build up with what I'm putting out there.
Yeah, no, I think you made a lot of excellent points about how things are portrayed in School of Rock, and what I just celebrate these days is that I really, performing wasn't fun for me for a really long time because of all the pressure of, not just being the gay kid from School of Rock. I didn't want that to only be my thing my whole life, right? And so like I put this pressure on myself to get cast in another movie or to like be successful in a different way. And what I'm celebrating is I really managed to like distance myself from that. I think I still have that little kid inside of me, right, who just wants validation and attention. I think we all do. But I managed to find the fun in performing again. And what's really great, been great to discover is that like that little kid me before School of Rock, that was me at my most authentic. Like I walked into that audition room, I sang a boy soprano rendition of Send in the Clowns. And then they created Billy around my character because they liked so much what I was bringing into the room. Like Billy was not a non-existent character before I came into the audition room. And I like to tell that story because like, I feel like I've over the years gotten back in touch with just like performing because I love to perform and I love to put myself out there and try new things. And that's the little kid in me. But like all this like doubt and fear crept in over the years, right? So I just try my best to like tap back into that love and the joy of being expressive, and I'm managing to do that even on TikTok.
Yeah. Even on TikTok,
even though it drives me crazy sometimes.
Dana, you mentioned, you brought up like the cast of like diverse characters and like even bringing it like further back into, because like this movie, yes, it's PG-13, but it feels like this is a movie that is timeless, but also that you can like show anyone. And I feel like for our generation growing up, like we kind of had the seed planted really young with like all that. Like all that was a show that had like just diverse characters and like a diverse cast and just like celebrated diversity. And then you kind of, as you're growing up, then it's like, okay, well, what's the next step that you want to do? We're going to kind of take that same formula, construct it around this idea of a slacker named Dewey Finn that just wants to rock. And, oh yeah, there's identity theft and crazy kids, and, you know, just kind of bring that to the big screen. And yeah, it's School of Rock is a really interesting film to talk about in the landscape of 2003, because 2003, there's so much content that came out that year that is like just hurts to watch now because it doesn't feel PC anymore.
Yeah, I know. One of my favorite shows growing up was Friends, and I still kind of watch it to go to sleep sometimes, but like there's a lot of homophobia on that show, you know? Like full episode arcs are about like someone potentially being gay, like, and how horrible that would be. You know, and it's just a reflection of the time, you know.
Yeah, Friends specifically, I felt like had a lot of jokes where the joke was, well, this character is gay, and it didn't take it anywhere. Like there was nothing beyond that. That was played, and that was meant to be funny about it. I know, you know, in your career, so you're a life coach. I'm someone who arguably could use some life coaching. But I want to know a bit about that. Kind of how'd you get into it, and kind of what that's like, and you know what do you do, and kind of what motivates you to you know life coach your clients.
Yeah, I'm a life coach, sorry, a mental health and mindfulness coach. Primarily work with queer folks, which is fun. It's a nice little full circle moment. I'm sort of trying to provide what I didn't have when I was on the other side of things. But yeah, it's how did I get into coaching? I was just really unhappy for a really long time, and I didn't really know how to change that other than to change myself, right? That's sort of like the message I got growing up. And then I think the first book I read that sort of opened my eyes in that way was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which was like the first self-help book I ever read. And it planted like a nugget in my brain. And then I read this book on gay shame called The Velvet Rage, which was like the second self-help book I read. And I was just like, whoa, there's information out there about why I feel the way I feel, you know, why I have trouble communicating like these tough emotions, like why I'm, you know, constantly like lonely and looking for validation, right? There's stuff out there on all of this, right? And so I just kind of took a deep dive into like building self-awareness in that regard through self-help books, through getting my own coach, through therapy, through you know, long walks. But like just like I just really I kind of became hooked on understanding myself, because I had never really made that effort before. Everything was external for me. It was very much like, how do I navigate this situation in order to be liked or to survive or to be accepted, right? And so the idea of self-awareness and then self-acceptance was really foreign to me. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with that process of cultivating self-awareness and cultivating self-acceptance. And so much so that I'm kind of like selfishly a life coach, because I say this all the time, but like, you know, coaching other people 20 times a week, that's like me getting to go to coaching 20 more times a week. Like, yes, it's obviously all about them and I'm very much there for them, but it's still a reflection of humanity that I'm getting to take part in. And I learn a lot about myself in those sessions too. So I feel like I go to coaching like anywhere from 20 to 24 times a week. And it's just a chance for me to continue on that journey of self-exploration and self-development, and in a way that empowers me, which is something I didn't have when I was, you know, until like my mid-20s, really. So that's a little bit of a long answer, but I hope that helps.
Well, I'm also curious about it because, you know, one of the things that I have kind of done over the last 6 years since we've done this podcast is I love to learn from other people, and I love to see the world through other people's eyes. We talked a lot on this episode about like representation and how much it matters. Dan and I are both cis married men that are heterosexual, and we'll never be able to see the world through your eyes and a lot of the eyes of the community, the LGBT QIA plus community. And over the years, I've learned a lot from like friends that I've made in the community. And one of the things that they've kind of talked about is the process of actually coming out and kind of the mental health struggles that really affect them. And it's someone told me that one of my friends told me that like there's like a 50% like suicide rate because of like when people like do decide to eventually come out, like it's very polarizing what the reaction is going to be. They're going to be either met with like extreme hatred or like love and acceptance. And being a life coach that specifically goes after, well, not specifically, but primarily deals with queer men, can you kind of talk about the process of like, does your practice as a life coach like kind of help ease that transition and kind of like make people feel like validated as they're going through that transition?
Yeah, I've worked with a few people prior to coming out, but most of my clients are, out. And so it's a lot more of like the aftermath of like, how is some of that shame still living in you, right? Or how, how do you now navigate life as an out gay man? Because you don't get to flip a switch on like 14 years of hating yourself, right? So it's like,
Sure.
it's or like whatever your relationship to yourself was, right? So often there's a lot of work involved in that. But I did work at the Trevor Project for 2 years, which is like a suicide prevention organization for queer youth. So I did talk to a lot of youth who were closeted and afraid to come out while I worked there. And yeah, it's in the suicide statistics you quoted, I don't know the exact statistics either, but yeah, it's pretty drastic, and it is hard, even if you're in an accepting family environment, sort of recognizing that you're different and then having to voice that to people it takes a certain amount of introspection. It takes a certain amount of bravery, courage, and yeah, and a lot of times I find that queer youth, they tend to put a lot of focus on, if I can just say this in the right way, or if I can just sit my parents down in the right circumstances, right? Or if I could just have the right set of people in a room when I do share this information, or if I can just write it all out ahead of time. There's so much emphasis on trying to control the outcome, because really all they want is love, acceptance, and approval, right? But so often you don't know how it's going to be received. That is the variable. And so a lot of my work at the Trevor Project was encouraging youth to just find a way of coming out that felt authentic for them, regardless of what the outcome is. Like, how do you want to look back on this experience and say that it was yours, and say that it's something that you're proud of? Because you do have control over where you say it, when you say it, how you say it, to who you say it. That's all in your control. You don't have any control over how it's perceived. And I think it's a loss to place so much emphasis on that, because it takes away something that's yours. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like in any way that like it's become easier now with all of like kind of living in a society now in 2022 where there's a lot more acceptance, there's a lot more representation in media? Do you feel like, is that process as hard, or do you find that it's a little bit like easier now?
I mean, I would imagine it's a little easier. Like, one of the things I really struggled with, since I've come out and I've done things like this where I talk about School of Rock, I have all these people sending me Instagram messages that are like, wow, I really needed you on screen when I was younger, right? Which is a great full circle moment for me, because no one was sending me those messages back in the day. I was just getting homophobia, right? So it was really nice to hear from these people. But but what was hard for me is I had no one. When I was younger, I like, if people were looking at me and I was on screen, I didn't have something to see myself in. And so it did feel really isolating. And so there is more out there now. So I have to imagine that that has to be impactful, right? That people can go and find themselves in things. But I think it's still difficult. It still involves it involves you recognizing that you're different, you know, and then having to like communicate that to people. So like, I think there will always be like a little bit of difficulty there. And then there's tons of variables, right? It depends where you grow up. We still have countries where it's illegal to be gay. We have like laws being implemented like all over the United States, like to take away trans rights, you know? So there's still a lot of difficulty. I think so long as hatred exists, that difficulty will exist. But yeah, it's probably a little easier.
I know, I feel like your background and coming in and growing up kind of in the world that you grew up in, there are like two like life realities that I feel like each one would be very difficult. One is, you know, growing up as a queer person and understanding that and going through both accepting yourself and then you know, letting the people in your life that you love know and you know, are they going to accept you, and then the reality of being a child actor. I mean, how many times have we seen child actors struggle, you know, many times not a fault of their own. It's the adults in their life, you know, mistreat them or overwork them, or they are trained to do one thing very well. And then when they try to pivot, it doesn't always work out so well. So, you know, you having this background of both going through and having your own coming out story and also having this background as a child actor, do you think, or I guess my question would be is, you know, how has that kind of affected how you go about, you know, life coaching, but just like in your general life, like how does your background kind of influence like how you carry yourself, you know, day to day, both in your personal and professional life?
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, those were two big factors growing up. I don't know that I have all the answers still. I think there's still a lot that I'm navigating on a day-to-day basis. You know, I still, you know, I'm someone who's really well adjusted, I think, and I have a lot of self-awareness and I have a lot of tools, and I'm a very mindful being. I just went on a 6-day meditation retreat. Like I have all the tools in my pocket, but I'm human and I still have a little kid who pops up in me every now and again. And he tells me that I'm worthless and that I need validation. Right. And it's, you know, and when those moments happen, I just do my best to recognize the context, that it's historical, that it's not really applicable to the present moment, and I try and get myself into the present moment by getting grounded or getting present. But yeah, it's but sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes, you know, that voice wins, right? And then in those moments, it's just like, how can you tolerate it? How can you self-soothe? How can you self-care? And that's just sort of my approach to life. I do my best to just kind of like ride the waves. And when I hit one that's difficult, how can I ride that? I don't know if I'm answering your question as concisely as I'd like to. I don't have all the answers, but that's sort of my approach.
Definitely. And I feel like, I mean, just saying I don't have all the answers is probably the wisest thing anyone has ever said on this podcast. So congratulations.
Yeah, I try my best not to pretend like I do. Even as a coach, I really just try to meet my clients like human to human. I think the strongest thing I've ever done in my career, right, is like the most impactful thing I've ever done in my career was be my unfiltered, totally authentic self before I knew any better. And then that was like globally broadcast, right? And it led to some of the hardest years of my life. And it's also led to some of the most like impactful moments of my life, right? So I just do my best to try and be as unfiltered and authentic as I once was, you know what I mean? And it's hard to do in this society, right? But that's sort of my goal, is to just always try and return to like what's genuine right now, what's authentic right now, what's me right now, you know?
One thing that I just want to just thank you for is kind of just the vulnerability that you've demonstrated in the last, 45 minutes that we've been doing this podcast, because I feel like bringing on Dan's wife, Abby, is like a great representation of kind of how sometimes we get starstruck and we have these like lofty ideas of like how people are, or like how famous people act and kind of go their day to day. And it's like, well, you talking about like how I don't having all the answers, but like also at the same time, like still saying that like, man, like I still struggle with, my own self-worth and my own, depression and kind of things like that, where I have to be, I think it's a reminder that like even people that, light up the big screen or Broadway or country bars, like that they still, at the end of the day, like they still go through their own mental health struggles.
Yeah, I mean, of course. We're all just human, which means that we're all just nature, right? So it's all just it just sort of happens,
Oh, my last question for you is gonna be, as far as like country music goes, how is kind of some of the experiences that you have faced, how has that impacted the type of music that you write lyrically?
Yeah, there were a lot of like breakup heartache songs for a while. I'm finally getting my fun stuff out. It's just like fun country sing-along stuff. But yeah, for a while it was stuff from like a bit of a heartache place. I think something I experienced in my 20s is, if you spend a long time not really knowing your self-worth, then that reflects itself in the relationships you choose. So I did have a lot of like conflict-ridden relationships in my 20s, which led to a lot of great source material for songs. But now that I'm a little more content with who I am, I'm finding more joyous lyrics pouring out. And this project that I'm currently releasing is pretty much all fun, which is exciting. But I do have some back pocket stuff that I plan on recording in the winter, which is a little bit more introspective. I saw an article once that sort of described my music, and I just felt like it was a really accurate depiction. But it's like it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's very unashamedly corny at times, but there's also like a deep amount of like introspection there, just probably because of my work as a life coach. And that's sort of what they said. And I kind of agree. I think that like I am who I am. I'm a bit of a corny person. I have a lot of heavy feelings, but I'm also very self-aware, and I like to put that into what I'm putting out so that people can see it, which is vulnerability. As you mentioned, vulnerability is just being yourself, right? Yeah.
I think my last question here for you is, for me, I mean, when you look at like relationships and friendships, that's something that I value so much. And whenever I meet someone or have time with someone, I always try to, maintain that connection. Josh and I connected several years ago, almost just on a whim. Could have been a one-time, merging of podcasts and doing a one-time show, but it turned into a strong friendship that's, still going, several years long, which has been cool. When it comes to the, relationships you made on School of Rock, are those friendships, I mean, are they things that you can still kind of like people you can reach out to, people you see, or have you kind of drifted over the years? I guess what's kind of like the current state of those relationships?
We all have an active group text to this day, if you can believe it. It's kind
That's
of annoying
amazing.
at times, and but it's very sweet. And those of them who live in New York, which is about 4 or 5 of them, will all be at my show on Tuesday, as far as I know. I'm performing a show in Brooklyn because I have a single coming out next Friday. I don't know when this podcast comes out, but yeah, they'll all be there supporting, which is just the most adorable thing. I mean, come on, 19 years later. That's what I'm saying. We all knew we were part of something special. I think just because of the bond amongst us at such a young age, you know what I mean? But yeah, wonderful friendships.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That's awesome to
That
hear.
is.
Yeah.
I feel like hearing that and like just having that confirmation just makes me really love the movie that much more, because it's like for like people like myself and like Abby that was on here, like we grew up with that movie, and it's always just kind of stayed the same. It's always just been like a source of like, I need comfort, I need to laugh, I need to sing, I need to insert emotion here, and it's always been that way for us. Whereas on the flip side, for those that were involved in the production of the movie, it sounds like it also has been a source of comfort and growth and just beauty and humanity for all of you guys to grow up together and still hang out and support one another.
Yeah, we were isolated in our post School of Rock experience, but these are some of the only people who really understood like what I went through at that age. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I'm definitely holding on to them for as long as they'll have me.
Well, I thank you so much for your time. I thank you to everyone that voted for School of Rock. This episode turned into something a lot more special than Dan and I originally anticipated on this being. So, Brian, thank you so much. Where can people follow you online?
Yeah, easiest place is just on Instagram, brian-falduto, F-A-L-D-U-T-O. And yeah, just a quick, if everyone's got a chance to go check out Same Old Country Love Song, my new single, you should. It's real fun.
All right. Well, Dan, where can people follow you online?
You can follow me over at Twitter at drock6499. It's where I post a lot of my like Tech Raptor articles about video games, video game reviews, features, things like that. And that's where I'm most active. So yeah, follow me over there and say hi if you feel so inclined. If not, that's cool too.
You guys, if you guys are cinephiles, you guys can follow me on Letterboxd. I'm at Captain Nostalgia. I'm also on TikTok at Gent, Gent, Ghostface, where I'm pumping out awesome Hellraiser content. But follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. So until next time, remember to keep on rocking.